You guys have any doubts, you can ask me in comments, like in chat, or through, you could just use your microphone and say it out loud. Okay. uh, Let me start. Today's session is about C++. We are going to learn the basics and few advanced steps of C++. Okay, let's start. So yeah, introducing myself, I'm Manikiran, as you guys know. So what you're going to learn today are, in basics, you're going to learn syntax, data types, operators, decision making loops. You have covered all this in the previous modules, like in the first and second session, as well as in your classes, right? So we're going to learn something new, that's object oriented, which was previously covered in the Java tutorial, but I'll explain even detailedly. And we're going to learn advanced things like error handling and file handling, right? Moving on to the basics, I'm going to skip the basic. Okay, Aman, bye. I'm going to teach you guys only the basics, just touch the topic. I don't go in detail because you guys have already done it in your classes, right? You guys already have the basic knowledge about it. So what is the syntax basically for C++? It's pretty much similar to that of C++. The only difference being the scanf and the printf statements are little, you use objects like cin and cout instead of scanf function and printf function, and the data types and operators are pretty much the same, right? Moving on to the data types, like as I said before in the previous sessions, the data types are going to remain constant, like they're almost same for all different languages. So we'll have boolean, which is true or false. We'll have char, which is characters. We'll have integers, like each boolean takes 1 byte, char takes 1 byte each char, and integer takes 2 bytes, float takes 4 bytes, double take 8 bytes. Alright, now the size of integer varies from small in we have bits and bytes, all those small data types. You can split integers into different types, so that you could use. And float, the numbers with decimal points are called floats. Double is similar to that of float, but except it will have a higher memory, you can store bigger decimal values. Alright, next, you can also create your own data types in C++. Advantages of C++ is that you can create your own data types. So how can you create new data type is by using a keyword called typedef. Alright, typedef is a keyword using which you can create your own data types. So for example, you can see typedef float marks. This statement creates a new data type called marks, which can be used instead of float. So for example, I want to create a new variable, say student1's marks, so you can just say marks student1. So previously you had to type float student1, right? So now you can, instead of float, you can say marks. So this makes it simpler to understand, as well as to make it more simpler, right? Next, we'll move on to operators. Now operators also remain the same in C and C++. Arithmetical operators are like addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, basic mathematical operations, right? Relational operators are like greater than, lesser than. Okay, let me list them out. addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, etc. Alright, and we have relational operators like greater than, lesser than, greater than, equal to, lesser than, equal to, so on. Okay, logical operators are like and, or, and not. Right, like basic logic gates, you have and, or, not, right? So and is like if two values are true, it returns true. If both the boolean values, if any of the boolean values false, it's going to return false. Okay, I'm assuming that you guys have basic knowledge on this in your previous class. Or if the boolean value of both the values is any one of them is true, it's going to return true. Okay, next, not takes only one value. Okay, if the boolean value of that, it returns the opposite boolean value of whichever boolean value you give. Say for example, a is true, it's going to return false. If a is false, it's going to return true, vice versa. That's all. Now bitwise operators are like binary or binary or and XOR. Yep, that's XOR, binary XOR. These are the bitwise operators you're going to use. Now assignment operators like equal to, plus equal to, minus equal to, division equal to, so and so on, right? These are the basic assignment operators. Now misc operators could be those of like size of function. All those are misc operators. Okay, moving on, we'll go to decision making. The basics are going to remain same in whichever language you're going to program. The basic logical statements, decision making statements are if else and switch statement, and you also have a ternary operator, which is mostly like highly used in C and C++. Okay, now okay, you guys have any doubts as of now, guys? If you have any doubts, you could chat, or you could send me a WhatsApp message, or you guys could use your microphone. All right, just stop me whenever you have any doubts. Assuming you guys have no doubts right now, let's move on. If statements, the simple statement is something like this. It checks for a boolean like a boolean expression, or it checks a condition which returns a boolean value, and if the boolean value is true, the if statement executes. Now if in case the the boolean value of the if condition is false, it's going to execute the else statement. Similarly, the ternary operator is somewhat similar to the if else condition, but except you can check only for one condition. Like in if else, you can have else if, and you can add on more conditions, but in ternary operator you can use only one condition, right? And ternary operators are mostly used during assignment because it returns only one value. If the condition is true, it's going to return the true expression, and in case the condition is false, it's going to return the false expression. Now switch statement. Now switch statement is somewhat similar to the if else statement, except it's highly used when there's so many conditions to use, like you have n number of conditions. Using a if else statement would be slightly hard compared to switch is going to be more user friendly and it's faster, it's technically proved faster, so we use switch statement. Now switch case uses a initial expression, like it checks the expression against certain conditions. Now in case this condition is executed, the statement of, like, in case the expression matches the condition, it's going to run the case of that it's going to run that block, right? Case block, you could say, this block of statements. Now break is optional, you could use, or like you don't have to use it, it's depending on your choice. Even default is your optional statement. When none of the cases match the expression, it's going to execute the default statement, and the default statement is optional, you can either use it or neglect it. Now that's about decision making. Let's move on to looping. Now I'm going pretty fast because you guys have already covered these basics, right? Now looping statements, while loop, it checks for a condition and it runs the particular set of statements until the condition is false, right? Till the condition is true, it keeps executing, and once the condition is false, it's going to come out of the while loop, like it's going to stop the loop. Do while is somewhat similar to the while, except it's going to check for the condition in the end, and it's going to run, like, perform the statement at least once. Now the for loop uses it, like, first you have to initialize it, so you could say looping, when you know particular number of when you know how many times you have to loop, you go for for loop instead of while loop. While loop is only for checking a condition, and you are you don't know how many number of times the loop has to get executed, you go for while. And when you know how many certain number of times you have to execute the loop, you go for for loop. All right, in for loop the syntax is, first you have an initializer, that is you create a variable, say I, a, or something, int a or int I. Then you check for the condition, that is till I is less than 10 or I is less than n, that is your condition. And increment or decrement operator, like you can go from 1 2 3 4 5, or you could go below, like 10 9 8 7, you could reduce, go below, lower. All right, and yes, that's about looping statements. Now that covers the basics. Now I've skipped a lot of basics because you guys have already covered it, right? If you guys have like doubts in the basics, you could comment, like you could send it on WhatsApp so I can come back and explain it, or you could send a message in chat. Right, let's move on to object oriented. Now the normal C programming had a lot of drawbacks, right? Now the basic drawback was the focus was given on the procedure, like how the program works, rather than on data. So the focus was on procedure rather than data. So now people wanted, like, this invented something called object oriented, where you guys could focus on the data rather than how the operations are performed. Now that is object oriented programming language. Some people have an opinion that this object oriented programming language is a bad idea, but 99% would say it's the best programming language. Okay, now the basic difference, object oriented is basically depending about classes and objects, methods, all these. Okay, so let's go on in detail what each class, object and method is. So you can say a class is somewhat like this blueprint, right? It's like a blueprint of a model or an object. It just says how many dimensions, whatever the how much values you need to have for a model to create a model. But an object uses this blueprint and creates a real-time application, like a real car in this case. So let's go from the definition. Class is a blueprint or a template from which objects are created. So this blueprint is from which these objects are created, while an object is an instance of a class. It's like an instance of this class. Alright, now objects, oopsie, I have switched this. Okay, now a class is a logical entity, like it's not physically represented in the memory. All right, it's just a logical entity. Now an object it stores something in the memory, like it uses some part of the memory and it's there, it's physically there, while class is something which is not present, it's just a logical part. Right, now you can create a class only once. A class with the same name can be used only once, like created once. But an object can be created. You can create n number of objects. Right? That is one advantage. Now, yeah, the next point is about the memory, which I said objects store some memory, but classes do not use the memory. Okay, now let's see how you can define a class. Let me show you in the Turbo C itself. Right, Turbo C. Okay, now let's see the basic syntax first before I start with the advanced language. The basic syntax is, instead of previously we had stdio.h, right? But now we use something called iostream.h. Okay, in C++ we use InputOutput iostream.h. And similarly, since we are using the console, we need to use the console.h. I mean, what is that? conio.h. Yeah. Next, it's similar to your C. We have a main function, and in the main function, you could say cout, or let's say you're displaying some message, say hello world, end line. Now let's run this code. Oops. Oh, basic mistake. Clear screen and get ch. I forgot to add get ch. Yeah, this is how this is the basic syntax for a C++ program, right? Cout is to, like, instead of printf function we have cout. It's a object way of displaying a message onto the console. All right, now you could also, let's take an example of taking a value, int a, enter a value. Now observe the syntax. All right, see the arrows. Now for C out, the arrows are pointing towards left, but for C in, the arrows are pointing towards right. Right? Now A. Now C out again, and let's say the value of A is A in line. Yeah, let's run this. Oopsie, end line. Yeah, say 45. Yeah, so the code works. Now observe this. C in takes a value. Now previously in C you had to use AND for memory, like creating or scanning the values, right? Now buffer methods. Now all that complication is removed. It's simpler. It's easy to understand, right? That's what C++ main objective of C++ and object-oriented programming is, to simplify the code. Now C out is to display, which will display interim value, right? Now after this, it's whatever you type is going to be stored in the value in the variable A using the method called cin, right? After you press enter, it's again going to like display the message using C out. The value of the A is, and yeah. Oh, ma'am is here. Hi, ma'am. Yeah, let's continue. Yeah, so this is a basic example of an input and output program. All right, so you take a value A and display it back. Now observe, you had to have percentage %d previously, right? Displaying in C you used percentage %d and then you had a comma A, but now you don't have the complication. You don't have to specify the type of the variable you're displaying. You can display any type, since it's an you don't even have to mention it's an integer float. Let's just change the data type to float, right? Say 45 again. Now previously in C, when you said float, the output of this would be something like 45.0000060. Now this is not what we require. We just want, if the value is decimal, just display the decimal, else display whatever the user has entered, right? So this also is like a major advantage. Let's run this again. Say 45.67. Okay, somewhat near, but yeah, this is the advantage of C++ over the normal C, right? Now let's go on and create our own data type. Okay, type def, let's say marks float type. So you can use marks A. Unexpected. Ooh, where did we go wrong? Data types. Yeah. Oh, geez. First you have to mention the data type, and then you have to specify your name, right? Yeah, now see the beauty of it. You can create your own data type. Say we just created a data type called marks. Alright, now marks A is the variable A is of type marks. and marks is another way of representing floats, floating point number, right? Next, let's create a class and an object. Class, say student. I'll explain each and every type or keyword used. Let me just first type the code in. Char. Okay, we have just created a class. Now this is a class. It doesn't, as you have seen in the definition, it's a blueprint and it doesn't save anything in the RAM or it doesn't consume memory unless and until you create an object of that class. Let's create an object of that class. Say student1. Now student1 is an object and student is a class. Enter name. Student1 dot name. Name of the student is let's just test it. Works. So let me explain this now. Now class keyword is to define or create a class. Okay, now we have created a class called student. So student is the name of the class, and you cannot have a different class with the same name. Say let's try creating another class of the same name. Alright, say public it's going to give you guys an error, right? Multiple declarations. You can declare only once. A class can be declared only once, okay, but you can create multiple objects. Student2. So you can observe we have two students, student1 and student2. So objects, you can create multiple objects, but class can only be declared once. Next, what is this public? This public specifies that you can use these values, like let's say int roll number is say 10. Let me clear this out. The roll number is 1 dot roll number. Okay, fine. Student1 dot equal to 10. Works. Now say I make this private. Now observe that I can't use this roll number or the values inside this class outside this class. Understanding? Like in the main function or anywhere other than this class, outside this class, I can't use the values or the members methods inside this private class. So when you specify it as private, you are just enabling the security feature such that you can't modify the values inside, like outside this class. Okay, there is another keyword called protected, where it's like you can use it inside the class and you can use it inside the subclasses like derived classes, but you can't use it outside the class, like outside in the main function or outside the class or the inherited classes. I'll explain this later when we start inheritance. Okay, for now let's stick to public. So now once it's public, it runs. Okay, next int, you guys already know what how to define integers, right? So int roll number is creating a variable roll number of type int. Now char star is like a pointer character, so it's used to store strings. This is one way of storing strings, or you could use the default normal method. Say this, you could save it in this method, so it's the same thing. Okay, okay, wait, let's create cout enter student name cin student1 dot name. The name is yeah, it's the same thing, but this is the C method or C way of representing a string, and the C++ method would be something like this. This is your way of representing strings in the C++. Also, there is something called string.h. You could include string.h and use this as string, but this compiler is an old compiler, right? I don't have the new compiler. This is the latest version of using strings in the C++. You can include string header file and you can define data types of string. So this is the new way of representing strings, but it is not supported in this Turbo C++ since the compiler is a pretty old compiler and you're gonna get error, right? So let's stick to this. Now this is how you create objects and classes in a C++. Okay, any doubts, guys? Okay, I guess no doubts. Let's move on to something called inheritance. Now let me explain what inheritance is. Now suppose you have a vehicle. Now what this vehicle will have is, say it will have a brand, right? Or you will have a vehicle name, right? Like say Toyota or something. So the vehicle name, okay, Toyota, okay, Honda, better. Honda has two-wheeler and four-wheeler. So Honda is the name of the vehicle or the brand name of the vehicle, and each vehicle will also have a license plate, right? License plate number, it will be there, right? So a two-wheeler is also a vehicle, right? And it will also have a brand name and a license plate. So when you're creating a different class called two-wheeler, why would you waste time on writing the same thing again and again when you already have a class vehicle where it is constant? It has some values which are similar, or methods or data attributes which are similar to that of the what you need. So you can just inherit the properties, like you can take those properties to you, methods and data attributes inside this class, and you can add something extra, like a two-wheeler will have a handle while a four-wheeler will have a steering wheel, right? That's the basic difference between a two-wheeler and a four-wheeler, and the number of tires and a wide range of difference, but the basic difference, let's say, for a handle and a wheel. Now let's see how you can use inheritance in C++. So this is a public class. Now you specify it public because if you say it private, you can't inherit the values. Those values cannot be inherited by the subclasses, because once you specify it as private, the security is fixed and you can't access those attributes. But okay, first let's try this out in the language. Okay, say let's do something different. Let's not do the same thing. Let's say class person. Every person will have a SSN, or let's say Aadhaar card number. Yeah, every person has an Aadhaar card number and every person has a name, right? So let's create a class called student which inherits the properties, public properties. Now what this public here means is that take all the values or all the attributes which are under the public security of this class, right? Of this vehicle name. Shit. This is supposed to be person, right? So whatever is inside the public of this person, public attributes of the person class, just take those inside you, and the security of this subclass. And then a student will have, say, what's the difference between student and teacher? Age. Oh no, the age will have, okay, let's say marks, and let's create a class teacher who's inheriting the properties of a student person, public float, let's say has salary. Okay, now the student is also a person, a teacher is also a person. So basically student will also have an Aadhaar card number and the student will also have a name. Similarly, a teacher will also have an Aadhaar card number, name, and he'll also have another characteristic or a data attribute called salary. But a student will not have salary, so let's say he has marks. Okay, now let's try creating an object of student, say student1 and teacher1. Okay, now say let's keep it the same way. The student name is, now observe, in student we haven't specified name, right? There is no additional way of we haven't explicitly represented name or defined name. So when we call student1.name, it's supposed to give us an error in case let's not inherit it. Okay, right? Too many types of declaration. Oh, oopsie, I forgot to add a semicolon. Yeah, So student1.name is not defined, so it's going to rise an error. But in case I inherit the properties, like take the properties of the person, then we don't have to worry about explicitly giving or mentioning the every data attribute of a person in the subclass called student. So let's say Gyan Manikiran, the name attribute is taken. So now the Aadhaar card number and the name variables are also in a student will also have those variables. I hope you guys understood this. Next, let me explain you what I was trying to say about the protected data type. Now, okay, say person name, person, okay, let's say we try to link okay, fine. What basically I wanted to say was, like, I can use the methods of this, like void print, or say like void work, see out walking, inline. Okay, say a person can walk, he has something method called walk. All right, now when I create a, or let's say when you run, when I call something called run, when student runs, he has to walk. I'm not able to explain this, but let's try this. Okay, so let's say I try to call student dot run or let's say the person one dot run. Yeah, it's an error because run is a protected oh shit, work. Doesn't have run, so let's say work. Yeah, is not accessible, so clearly it's protected. You can't use the method walk outside this class. All right, it's protected. The security is enabled such that you can't modify or use that function or method outside the class. All right, now but let's say you student one tries to run walking. Right, now observe, student was able to access that walk method while you couldn't access that walk method outside the in the main function. This is because the protected security is such that it can be accessed within the class and the subclasses, but cannot be accessed outside the classes. Like you can use this walk inside the person, inside the student, but you can't use it outside the person or a student. Alright, that is what protected is. You can use it inside the class and subclasses. Or let me make a table so that you guys can understand it better. Let me just create a difference between differences. Okay, let me insert a table. Okay, so let's say public, there's private, and there is protected. Now public can be used in, okay wait, let's add another okay fine, let me create another table. Okay, now let's say public, private and protected. Okay, now inside the class, right, inside the class can be used like public can be used, like if the security is public, the values, attributes can be used inside the class. It can be in, even if it is private or protected, it can be used inside the class. In subclasses, inside subclasses or the classes which inherited the properties, all right, public you can, private you can't, and protected you can use it in your subclasses or the inherited classes. All right, in the outside the classes, outside the class, or say in the main function, you can use the attributes in the if it is public. You cannot use it if it is private, or even if it is protected outside the class. So this is like basic difference between public, private and protected. Okay, that's what I was trying to explain. Next, move on to function overloading. Am I going too fast? Like I planned this for 2 hours and I think I finished it in 1 hour itself. Okay, function overloading. Now what function overloading is basically using the same method or using the same function in different ways, while the values sent or the parameter, depending on the parameters you send. Say for example, take this example, the sum, when you send only one value, it's supposed to return the same value, like sum of one number is same number, right? In case the sum of two values are sent, it's supposed to add those two numbers and send it back. All right, now you're working on two numbers, so the same function sum is defined 3 times, right? But which method is called depends on the parameters, number of parameters or the parameter types you send, right? Depending on what the logic of the function overloading you're doing. So for example, you send 3 parameters, it's going to call the last sum of 3 numbers, like it's going to return a plus b plus c. Okay, let's try this in the console. Let's say public void void work. Let's say work. Okay, fine. Let's say talk. Okay, and we say out talking to himself. The person will be talking to himself if the message, there's like only one person talking, or there's only one message. Okay, let's sounds good. Okay, in case the same, let's say there are two messages, like what I mean to say is there's a two-way conversation going on, then individuals are talking to another person. He is talking to another person, all right? But let's say there are three messages or three conversations going on. Then you could say it's a group, or conversation is like a discussion going on between a group, talking in a group. Okay, makes sense. Okay, now let's remove all this. Okay, now let's say person 1 dot talk, let's say hello. He's talking to himself. Okay, so when I send only one message, he's talking to himself. All right, now suppose I say hello, give me an example of Adam. Hi Steve. Okay, so when there are two messages, he is talking to another person. Now observe, I haven't changed the name of the method, so you are using the same method name, but which is being called depends on the parameters you send, the parameters being this. All right, this is method overloading. Okay, let's try for another. Hi guys. Now this, when there are more than two people, you usually call it a group, right? So you are talking in a group. This is what do you call, function overloading. There's something also called as operator overloading, but it is a bit advanced and I'm not sure you would need it anyway for now. So this would be the basic knowledge of OOPS you need to know right now. Okay, that covers object-oriented programming language. Now let's go on to something advanced or something more complicated, which you will need in your daily life. What is the basic disadvantage in the normal C programming or the procedural programming language is that they don't provide you with features like error handling or exception handling. Now what this exception handling is suppose you have an error in your program, the program terminates or stops working, and you don't have a way to stop the program from getting terminated, or like you can't say that if there is an error, display error and continue the next step. You can't do that in procedural programming language. While in object-oriented programming language, you have a feature called exception handling, through which you can like get the error, perform certain functions depending upon what the error type is or what the error is, and then you can continue with the program without terminating the program all on whole. Like, you don't have to completely stop the program. You could say one or two methods can be skipped and you can run the rest all program. Okay, that is called exception handling. And as I told you, my compiler is a bit old compiler. I can't show you the working feature. I can just show you how to program it. So the basic syntax, or let's go to the basic, what are the keywords you will be needing in a exception handling. Alright, now throw. What this throw keyword does is, say you have an error, you know there is an error, there's going to be an error, you raise an error. To raise, what raise means is like you tell the compiler there is an error. Okay, you just tell it by yourself, and then what this catch does is, once you tell the compiler, or what you do in throw is got by this catch what do you call this as a method or function keyword, and this catch will get that error and store it in some value or a variable. Okay, now depending on the variable value, you can use try to execute certain code block, like certain, you can say display some error or perform something else other than what the error is going to be. For example, say this. Okay, now say, okay, sorry, try is like the normal code, perform that code, like say 10 divided by 0. Let's say that is the program, that's happening inside, or that's the basic program that's supposed to happen. Alright, now let's say the catch detects 0 division error. Alright, now in case we perform 10 by 0, it's a 0 division error, which should terminate the program in C, right? But in C++, you can override this, and you could say, in case there is a 0 division error, tell the user to enter different number. Okay, instead of stopping the whole program, you can just say the user to change the values, or you can just skip or display the message and skip that operation and continue with the rest of the code. Alright, certain other errors would be something like string operation, like performing arithmetical operations on string. That would be something like data type mismatch or something like that. Or there are many types of errors. Okay, let me not list them all, but these are basic. This is how you can handle errors. Okay, next, okay, this is how you can write a simple code on how you can accept, or like you can handle errors. Okay, so first we have the input output stream, then console. This is not actually needed unless you're working on a console. And let's say you have a function called divide, which divides which has a and b arguments, and if b is 0, that is if the denominator is 0, then display throw, that is which we discussed earlier, is like throw a message, send a message to the compiler saying there is some error, and in case that error is what you in the try catch thing, you can get those errors. Depending on the error, you can perform certain action. All right, so for now we are just displaying the message called division by 0 error, and we're going to terminate. Okay, say for example after this I have some other program like a becomes 20. Okay, now in the previous program, like without this try catch, all this error handling, what the program would have done is it would have terminated when there was an error, and it would have never changed the value of a. But now it displays the error, and then it what do you say, changes the value of a. Now observe there is C error. This is another object way of representing errors in C++. Okay, next let's move on to file handling. Another disadvantage of normal procedure programming language is that there is no option, like there is, but there's no direct method or easy way of handling data. You can work on your memory like that RAM, but there is no direct methods to work on your file storage like hard disk or secondary storage devices. All right, that is what is the major advantage on C++ or the object oriented programming language. They have features like file handling. So basically offstream is in case you want to write data into files, you use offstream data type. Offstream is a data type. Okay, you will understand more clearly understand when you see the code. All right, now let's see, offstream is a data type, and let's say a variable name out file is a type is of type offstream. So if you declare this as offstream, you can work on certain data files. Like say we'll open a file, say something like my data.txt or a text file, for instance. We open it and we ask the user what you want to store inside that file, and whatever you get through input, save it in the file. I mean, save it in a okay, wait, I forgot to mention that. Let's say a data is a string, okay, an empty string. So first we get the age. Let's say for example we get some data like a string format, in string format, and then that data gets saved or written inside the file called this out file. It saves whatever data you have written inside that file, and it closes it, like you terminate it using the file out file dot close. So first you define your out file, offstream data type variable. Next you open the file where this is like the location or the path for your data file. All right, say for example it's in C drive somewhere in some folder called my project. So this is the file path. This is called path. Open that path and the file which is there inside the path. Next, get the data what you want to store inside that file. Write the data into the file and close the file. Now, why do you have to close the file? So most of the time, the data is not saved inside the file unless you close this or you close the program. You would have observed when you have tried deleting a folder or deleting a file, when it is open, you can't delete it or you can't modify that program other than the program which is accessing it right now. like most of the time it happens in Windows, where you try to delete a folder containing a file which is already open in some other application. The thing is, if the application is accessing it, it doesn't allow you to change or modify it. So unless you close the application, the data is not saved into the file, right? Next, offstream is one where you have to write to the file. There is another similar way to read from the file called ifstream. Ifstream is a data type to read from the file. Alright. Similarly, we have to add data. Okay. First, we define data type called ifstream data type called infile, like to take the value, read the values. This is again being the path where you want to get the data from. Say we have a new pen drive, and the pen drive folder you have some data. In that you have my project dot let's try some other extension, say doc, okay, or rich text format rtf. Okay, now this won't work because the data type, word and rich, this is in a different format. By basically when we write files, we are writing in binary, so this will create corrupted files. Let's use the normal text file or a dat file. Okay, be very specific on the data extensions, because it doesn't work or save properly, or you might have corrupted files. Okay, cout is once you read the file, whatever data is inside the file, you take it, and whatever the data is there in the file, you save it to the the string data. Data is a string, right? So you save whatever is in the file into the variable data. Next, you just display the data or do perform functions, what you want to do. And if you want, you can read again and again. You can read n number of times unless you close the file. Now again, closing the file is very important, because as I said, if other functions or other applications need it, those might not be able to access it, since this application is accessing it right now. Right, I guess I've covered it. And fstream is another data type where instead of having read mode, write mode, you can have both of them into the single mode. Like you can perform both of them together. That is fstream. Okay, it is similar to that of offstream and ifstream, but just the data type is different, and you can perform both the operations simultaneously. Alright, that is it for today, guys. I guess I'm done. If you guys have any questions, you can ask me right now, or you can leave comment chat or you can send me through WhatsApp your questions through WhatsApp. Okay, can I conclude this session, guys? Yeah. Okay, thanks for learning.